Okay, welcome back. Ukraine is facing pressure after Russia captures the city of Avdiivka, and now NATO is calling on the United States for further assistance, military assistance. Our correspondent Shelby Wilder has the very latest from Kiev. Shelby?
Well, good evening from Ukraine. To provide the latest updates from the front lines, Russia aims to maintain its momentum following the capture of the Ukrainian city of Avdiivka over the weekend, delivering a significant blow to Ukraine and securing a symbolic victory. Russia intends to exploit its offensive campaign while Ukraine regroups on the battlefield. Ukraine is grappling with ammunition shortages, manpower limitations, and a lack of air support compared to the sheer mass of Russia's military. These factors have allowed Russia's military to make gains, such as the loss of the Ukrainian city of Avdiivka. Ukraine's armed forces are facing pressure at multiple points along the front lines. Ukraine's military reported that last night was particularly challenging, with continuous Russian attacks, although successfully repelled in the Zaporizhia region. That's the southeast of the country, where Russian forces have attempted to breach Ukrainian positions. Additionally, Russia launched numerous missiles and attack drones at Ukraine overnight. As we approach the 2-year mark of Russia's full-scale invasion on February 24th, we have separately heard NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg urge the United States to take action on the foreign aid bill that's currently held up in Washington. Stoltenberg emphasized the need for the United States to fulfill its promises, calling on Congress to approve military assistance to Ukraine promptly. But let's take a listen to what he had to say.
I count on the House of Representatives to agree support to Ukraine because this is not charity. This is an investment in our own security. We have true transatlantic burden sharing on the support for Ukraine. If you add economic and military support, European allies and Canada are actually providing more support than the United States. But of course, the US support remains vital, and therefore it's vital that the US House of Representatives agrees a package for Ukraine.
Despite the latest foreign aid bill for Ukraine passing in the Senate last week, House Speaker Mike Johnson's failure to bring it to a vote has sparked criticism, raising concerns about America's assistance to Ukraine during this critical time. Otherwise, that's latest from me reporting in Kiev. I'm handing it back to you.
Shelby, thank you so much for that report. Joining us now to discuss foreign policy expert and the Grand Marshal of the Israel Day Parade, Harley Lippman. Also joining us back again, former CIA Covert Operations Officer and host of the President's Daily Brief podcast, Mike Baker, and back with us in studio, Benjamin Weingarten. Thank you all so much for joining us. Harley, what's your reaction to that report by Shelby?
The question is, why should we care about Ukraine? And there's one answer, very simply. We want to avoid World War III. If Russia wins in Ukraine, they will then feel so emboldened. They've already targeted Poland and the Baltic republics that are members of NATO. And NATO has a clause. There are 50 nations in NATO, and the clause says that if one is attacked, all have to defend that nation. So I don't know of any dictator in history that successfully conquered their neighbor and then just stopped. And this is why I care. I don't want World War III. And lastly, the United States needs to honor its promises. We promised Ukraine we'd give them that assistance, and they're willing to do the heavy lifting. They're willing to do the fighting and the dying. So we really need to stand by them. If we don't do this, it will be the apocalypse.
You know, Speaker Johnson says that funding's not getting through the House unless it is attached to some form of border policy reform or money here. Mike, what do you make of that? World War III, is that where this leads to? I don't know if you think Putin stops after Ukraine. What's your take?
No, I agree with Harvey 100%. Look, he's not going to stop there, whether it leads to World War III or not. He certainly has other ambitions. Look, the dithering, sort of the dysfunctional activity in Washington, D.C. is very disappointing. And if you just step back and think about it from a pragmatic point of view, for those that are in D.C. saying, well, what's the end game? Why are we constantly spending money? If what you're thinking then is, okay, we get a negotiated settlement, you're not going to get a negotiated settlement unless Ukraine is either on the offensive or holding Russia to a very costly stalemate. They cannot win a war of attrition. So without the West's, and frankly, without the U.S. support, Putin will win. He will end up in Kyiv. So if that's what those in Washington, D.C. who are holding this up are okay with, then they should have to come out and make that statement. Say, yeah, we're fine with Putin taking over Ukraine and then making further moves. Because he has said repeatedly that the greatest disaster of the 20th century was the collapse of the Soviet Union. And he's been trying to rebuild it ever since.
And Benjamin, what do you think?
Well, I think the counter argument that you're going to hear from Washington is we've thrown tens of billions of dollars at the Ukraine-Russia war. We can't point to necessarily any resolution that's coming. The president has not clearly articulated what's in our vital national interest and what is the end game that we ultimately expect. We can't track where the billions of dollars flow. So consequently, make the case to the American people that the funding ought to continue and that it ought to be prioritized over having a sovereignty, without which, if there's World War III and our borders open, that puts us in even further peril. So that's a question that has to be answered, I think, by the defenders of the funding bill here.
Well, we're going to see how that shapes up here in the House. President Biden putting some pressure on Speaker Johnson there. Mike Baker, Harley Lippman, gentlemen, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ben, you stick around.